Nice, way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, John, finish on. Coach Carl.
Great job, guys.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 234 of the Today's Leader podcast. Today we share the wisdom of Scottish visionary Joseph Trodden. Now, Joseph has a vision of a world where the best entrepreneurial ideas win and businesses can reach their full potential. Now, the podcast started with a little bit of a laugh. I usually start our podcast with tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm pretty sure that Joseph wasn't expecting that particular conversation. So he shared some laughs with that. So most of the guests get a bit daunted by that, talk about where do we want to start. But Joseph found that quite humorous. So it really got the conversation off on a great start, on a great foundation. Now, Joseph provides structure and clarity for visionary entrepreneurs who want to focus on reaching the next level. He's strategic, he's analytical, he's relentless, he's focused, and he's a systems thinker. And that's really important in that skill set when you are wanting to help entrepreneurs who are very rarely aligned to that sort of a skill set. Now, he works with a very specific entrepreneur and founders, and he talks about the businesses that hit the inflection point. And this is a really important aspect of the work that Joseph does, the inflection point. So the people that he works with are usually, specifically 2 years plus into their journey. They're approaching 500K to 1 million in revenue. They usually have a team that's just less than 10. They do have ambitions for growth, and they acknowledge that that ambition to growth, but they acknowledge that something has to change. So it's a very clear, specific entrepreneur that Joseph works with. So let's get into this insightful conversation just after we hear from Think and Grow Business.
The Coach Curl podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
And welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. I've got Joseph Trodden. Joe, how are you?
I'm great, Tony. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Share with my listeners, tell me the Joseph Trodden story.
The whole thing. Yeah, but the abridged version is so I did the typical thing of going to university from school, did law, which was probably just a huge waste of time. I didn't think about what I really wanted to do. I just went and did a thing that was supposed to be a career. Then I went and worked in IT for a bit because all the money was in there. But I had my epiphany moment in my early 30s about what do I really care about. And it was change in the world and people's minds and human potential.
Okay.
So from there, I did a psychology degree. It was a weird one, actually, Tony, because I think I did that degree because I needed academic permission to change careers. Wow. I felt like, because I'd been quite academic all my life, and then, you think, well, if I want to do a different thing, I needed a degree to do that. But anyway, so I did my psychology degree. I went through various things, working in mental health with young people and so on, but ultimately it came down to and starting my own business initially, which was a social enterprise, and then working out, do you know what, I actually don't particularly like running this, but I like other people, like helping other people to realize their potential.
Okay.
Like working with leaders to say, you're trying to get to this point, and I can help you to see things you can't see. So then I started coaching in the entrepreneurial space with an organization called Entrepreneurial Spark, who were the largest free accelerator in the world. And then from there, I split off to do my own thing because there was a particular client group that I really liked working with. And I wanted to focus on them. And basically, I've still got my own vision. I've still got my own things that I want to achieve. So that's the story. A lot of bumbling until about 30 and then just iterating towards what I really want. And
that wake up call, that wake up call of saying, well, this is what I really want to do. And you've got a real specific specialization. So tell us a little bit about that. You've got a very clear target audience of the people that you want to help. So tell me a little bit about that and what compelled you to dive into that.
Sure. So the entrepreneurs that I work with are at something called the inflection point. So there are many of these inflection points where the business and the leader needs to evolve and quickly. Yeah. But I work with them at the first point. So what I mean by that is on the entrepreneurial journey, typically you have the idea as an entrepreneur, and then you go out and you're trying to get things to stick and nobody's listening to you and it's really hard and you're changing stuff all the time and it's really reactive. And then if you've got something, you'll get a traction point. And then you start to build those customers, you get your initial team, and it looks like things are going great guns. But then you hit this point where if you're the entrepreneurial leader, it just feels like you're spinning plates all day. Like it's just one fire after the next, and you can't seem to get up to your next level of growth. So at that point, they are usually around £1 million in turnover. It depends on what the business is, and their margins and so on, but roughly. And they've got a team of about 10, give or take. But ultimately, the entrepreneur's still really at the center of everything. And this is part of the reason that everything slows down, because they're still this fulcrum and they aren't really letting go. And typically, there's no strategy written down because they've been necessarily reactive right through this first phase. But now it's time to get things formalized, to get some real A players around. It's typically quite a junior team by that point. So it's making that full assessment of what does the next version of this business look like? And what does the next version of the leader who runs that looks like?
So you're telling me that it's not just energy, passion, and enthusiasm and the innovative spark that keeps a business going. They need more than that, Joe.
That starts the business off. And as we talked about actually just before we came on the air about, there's a specific type of entrepreneur that I work with. So I don't know if your listeners are familiar with Myers-Briggs, but it's a personality test, but it reveals a lot about how you think. So the type that I deal with is something that's called an ENFP. So Myers-Briggs is, you get 4 letters basically that give you an indication of your cognitive style, how you think and interact. So E is for extrovert. They will, go out and engage people. That's really important and at the start of that journey. N is for intuitive, which means that they think in the big picture. So they've got that vision. They've got somewhere that they're trying to get to. The next one, they can be either on the next dimension. That's a T or an F. So Fs are good at going and getting the people. They care about the people. People can feel that energy, and that's why they'll join them in the organization. Or Ts are really driven. So people who are excited by driven people will come in. Yeah. One of the key dimensions is the last one, which is the P for perceiver. So a perceiver is somebody who is opportunistic and will live in the moment and can roll with the punches. The opposite of that is something called a judger. So a judger is somebody who really wants the plan and the structure, and they don't like the uncertainty. So if you combine those, for me, this is, I think the perfect entrepreneur is a bit of an overstatement, but that thing of I am extroverted, I'll go out and meet people, I'll sell them this big vision. I'll connect with people, or I'll be so driven that that'll draw people into me because they're excited about this person doing the mission. And then this last dimension about being opportunistic, they see failure differently. There's a lot of talk about on the entrepreneurial journey that you have to be able to, deal with failure and handle the rejection. Like a really strong perceiver, a really strong P, almost just doesn't see failure at all, because it's already about the next thing. and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You know, it's always like, we're here now. What's the next opportunity? We're here now. So with that type, they're the ones that can make it to that first inflection point. The challenge then is, if you look at that P trait, that perceiver trait, is that you can't now just be reactive, because there's too much going on. You know, that you can do that when you are trying to find your way, but now there are too many things going on. There's too many people involved. You can't you can't cover a cash flow hole with your credit card anymore. Like you've got to get these plans and structures down, which is where I help them in terms of putting that stuff in, and also just highlighting some of these things about their leadership.
And you're very clear around that particular behavioural. And I even saw on your website, it says, if you're not this type, do the online course. Do you have people doing that? Do you have people not hitting that particular behavioural style, and then doing it through the online process, and then coming back after they've learnt that? Or how does that work for you?
The online is just free, because I want to add value in. The thing is, when you're at this first point, there's a million strategy books, you know? And what pained me, I guess, Tony, was you'll go to so many webinars, but it's too fragmented to try and do anything with. You know, there's no, because I'm a guy who craves structure and I'm trying to introduce that, I see them going to this webinar, but then you learn about one thing from person A, and then you go to person B's webinar, and those two things don't fit together. Yeah. So now it's like, how am I supposed to use these? And then you go to the third one, and none of that fits together either. And you can take these nuggets, but there's no cohesive strategic approach. Yeah. So the online programs are my way of just saying, here is what you need at this stage. The thing with my particular type of entrepreneur is that they don't want to do that. Like I spent quite a lot of time trying to teach them, here is how you do this thing. Yeah. And that's not what they need. What they need is somebody to like walk them through the process. Like when I work with the clients, I'm talking out of their heads and I'm creating the document and the structures. Not to say I'll decide how you run your business, not at all. But they won't do that. Like, please don't write anything down. This is why there is no strategy. Like, they don't write anything down. It's all about now, moment. And what I encourage them to do, and when I work with them, is to go, now we've got a strategic plan. See your amazing mind that can create that sort of something from nothing or solve a really tricky problem. Look at this specific thing rather than look at everything and then bring in all this confusion again. So the online program is really it gives me that credibility to say this is what we'll be going through, but it's really as a way for them to go, I need this, but I want somebody to help me to do it.
So in many ways, you're connecting the dots, plotting out the map journey, so to speak. So you're right in saying that there's so much information out there, and there's so much access to information now. And I know in Australia, we have a lot of government funded programs that provide so much information, but it is fragmented and it can be confusing. And we find some people just get in this perennial showing up at every workshop because one day they're thinking they're going to get that gold nugget that's going to change the world. So your programs connecting the dots, plotting out the path and getting them to follow a logical step through the information. I'm basically saying this is a particular stage on the entrepreneurial journey. And I don't know what it's like in Australia, but here there is plenty of startup support. And it's a bit of an easier one to support, because essentially you're saying go out and speak to your customers, right? Go out and speak to your customers, try and get something to stick, test your idea out. The lean startup, I mean, even a lean startup though, there's not very many successful entrepreneurs I've met that followed that particularly religiously. Like, the principles are still there, but it's not quite as process driven at that point. It is very, very opportunistic. But it's this very specific point in the journey, and then there's
there are other inflection points beyond me where I'm saying there's somebody else for that. You get to 50 or 100 employees. Some of my principles are probably going to help, but there's better people than me for that point on the journey.
Yeah.
I want to help you here. If you're this specific type of entrepreneur at this point on your journey, I've got the stuff that you need.
What are some of the challenges that you see, Joe, that are faced by entrepreneurs and founders? Because, one of the challenges that we've identified with a colleague of mine is that we talk about the leadership aspects around a founder. Once they've got that investment coming through, they've got some angel investment or whatever the case is, and predominantly they're not. The idea is what's being invested in, not the person. So we see some real challenges in that, taking a founder from that enthusiastic bubble of ideas into someone that's a bit more structured from a leadership sense. But what other challenges are you seeing that are being faced by entrepreneurs and founders?
So the inflection point, one of the key challenges is letting go. It's talked about a lot, but again, it's a very specific case at this stage. So they haven't really, it depends how you define leader, I guess.
Yeah.
But they haven't really thought about what does it mean to lead.
Yeah.
They have been so inside the business. You've got this point where they've been going along that journey, and the people around them have almost been an extension of their mind, like in their job role. It's like they're a resource to get something done. So you'll get that junior marketing person because you don't want to do the Facebook posts anymore, so they can do that. But they're not really in charge of marketing. You've still got your hand in there. You'll still sort of, get involved in stuff and maybe even change posts. I mean, a great simple example of that is one where I had an entrepreneur who the person would still give them posts for sign-off. So then every time that they made a little tweak, and they always had an opinion, but every time they made a little tweak, what you're saying to that person is, that isn't good enough. Like, you still need to send this through me. So that even at a subconscious level inside their head, it's like, oh, I'm still not good enough to do this. That's still, they still need to do this work. Like, there was no true ownership.
Yeah.
And it's the same with something like a sales function. They think that they'll get somebody on and just be like, well, why can you not just, pick up the phone and sell in the same way that I can? This is obvious, this is clear. And they forget sometimes about what the journey was like for them to get to that point. The mistakes that they had to make, that people are going to do things differently. So that's not really leadership for me at that point. It's almost like your internal team are like a bunch of freelancers who are just doing, here is a very specific thing. I want you to do a particular way. Go and do it. And it's the change to go, okay, how much ownership are you actually going to give these people? What are the parameters for what you'll enable them to do? Here, again, a quick example of that. If you were to take a sales function, and are you saying to the person who's running sales for you now as a founder, if you're the founder, you're trying to sort of devolve that function, you can say, right, here's the target. Here's the target. It's £100,000 in the quarter. Now, are you then saying, and here are the people that we want you to target, and here's the way that I want you to approach them, and here's the script, and here's your call registers for when you're going to do it and how, and here's exactly how you follow up. Like, all you're doing is saying, you might as well just have a robot, and I'm not saying that you go, here's your 100, it's 100 grand for the quarter, you go and do it.
Yeah.
Because it will depend on what that person's like, their experience. But just to think about the more that you're pulling that down to, here is exactly how this needs to be done, the more you're always going to need to be involved in it. The less you've actually devolved anything. And that person's always second guessing about, is this, because they're trying to be the founder, right?
Yeah.
They're going, is this how they want me to write that Facebook post? Is that word correct? Is this exactly how I should have had that phone call? So it's about thinking about how do you actually devolve that, and where do you give people ownership and let them make mistakes?
It's really from what you're just talking through, Joe. It's the leaders making themselves this pivotal part in the business that cannot be moved on until they let go. So I can understand the absolute the program and the benefit of the program that you do. It's about empowering your team, giving them potentially the targets, and allowing those mistakes and stuff ups to happen, because we're all going to make them. The founders made them, and yes, it's their baby, and they have got to their stage from where they are, but we're always reminded of that great of hiring great people and surrounding ourselves with better people. So you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You don't want to be the person of which that business basically pivots around and becomes indispensable to that business. And I guess we see that in history. Some of the founders of some of these multi-million-dollar digital companies that are suddenly pushed out, after they've achieved a level of success, and all of a sudden they're no longer the founder because there's some structure there, and there needs a board of directors and all of these sorts of things. And the founder's potentially the last thing that the business particularly needs. So letting go, empowering, it's a really clear, strong message there. So
just a quick practical tool on that is to just write out everything that is involved in the function.
Yeah.
And then think about, what is it that I am willing to let go? Because maybe in sales, there are key things at the top end of that strategy that they're not willing to let go.
Yeah.
But are you willing to let go, who they choose? So if you're saying the persona is going to be decided by me, but you go and find the right people, are you willing to let that go? Are you willing to let go how they do their follow-ups? How much are you willing to actually, and it's a test.
Yeah.
It's too hard to let go completely, I have found, because as you go through that first part of the journey, it is on you. Like, everything is on you. And if there is a mistake, it comes back to you. There's no other way for that to be done. So it's easier to go, let's let this go in stages. Give them that and let's see what happens with it. Give them this and then we'll see what happens with it. I mean, there's another point to this, that you'll need to assess whether they are the right person to go up to that next level. It's like when you get promoted as a sports team from one division to the next, half the team stay and half the team just won't be there for the next journey. You need to upgrade your people there as well. And that can be a tough one too. But just think about what you're devolving. Put everything down in a function and then have an honest discussion with them about what you're willing to let go.
Yeah. It's like the John Maxwell talks about the law of sacrifice. To go up, you've got to give up. So there's got to be things that we give up, whether it's a leadership journey, whether it's a business journey, because ultimately you can't hold on to everything that you've got and continue to pile stuff in. It's just inconceivable. It cannot happen. So Joe, from your perspective, you would have seen or been aware of, observed a lot of failure rate within startups. From your experience, what have been some of the root causes for that?
Again, for me, it comes down to the cognitive style of the person who is starting. There's so much hype around entrepreneurship, and this idea, like almost anyone can do it as long as you've got some idea. It's just not my experience. There's a particular subset of people who are wired to do it. And again, I would relate it back to that style, because you've got to be able to deal with the failure. So for me, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not trying to set up a large organization. It's not what I want, and it doesn't suit my thinking style. I'm like a special forces, parachute in, do a specific thing, and then out. Yes, with my entrepreneurs, sometimes there's a thing, that a gap I can fill for them past the 90-day program. But ultimately, I'm looking to extricate myself. I want to go in and do this specific thing. And part of that is because I don't like failure. I don't like uncertainty. I don't like huge levels of risk. I want to know, what are we doing? Where are we trying to get everything nailed down? And if with that mindset, that is incredibly hard in the startup journey. because you will I can perfectionize a bit, which is a double-edged sword, right? Because if you're wanting your strategy, you want it to be tight and clear. Perfect's maybe a bit strong, but you want it to be as clear and tight as possible. That doesn't work in the early stages.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like going out and sort of like networking or anything like that. It just doesn't suit me. I'm too hyper functional about like what are we going to do together, rather than like how are the kids, and building those kinds of relationships, which you need to do in that early stage. So for me, it's about the mindset thing. And what will happen if you have too much of a structured and planning mindset is you'll sit and create the perfect spreadsheets or whatever, this what you think is a perfect plan. Then you'll be too frightened to go and do anything with it, because if it's wrong, then it'll crush your identity as somebody who gets things right. It's really hard. I'm not saying you can't do it if you're a different mindset type, but you need to be aware of just how painful that journey is going to be for somebody who thinks in that way. What I mean by that is, if you take the P, failure is just like, I don't care, like next thing. If you take a J, they're going crushed. That plan was perfect, and now it's not working, and now I need to deal with the emotional sort of hangover from that. So you may well be able to deal with it, but for me, it is about the cognitive style. People hang on to stuff for too long.
It'd be a real challenge, I would imagine, and part of that process, that I'm sort of tuning it into the way that I think is, many people I see fall in love with the plan. So they know that the plan is towards an outcome, but they're not in love with the outcome. They're in love with the plan, because they'll keep doing the plan. Yep. Even if the plan is failing, falling over, not working, not hitting the mark, but it's the plan. That's what we plan. So they stay on it, and it causes a great deal of pain. So I can imagine that mindset is one of the really most important things for any sort of business or leadership journey. So when you sit back and think about being born again or living again at the age of 30, who's inspired you in your leadership journey?
It's interesting. I mean, you mentioned Maxwell. I like some of his bits and pieces. I like Bill Walsh's. He was the American football coach. He was talking about the score takes care of itself. Yeah. If you get the right processes in there and the right focus, that stuff will come. I really like that. It's more these sort of bits and pieces of people, like the single-minded focus of somebody like Steve Jobs, but the egotistical nature of somebody like that means, could that have been something more? And it's quite a high-risk strategy. I love Elon Musk's engineering and visionary powers. I think that he has a challenge of letting go. I remember him talking about, being the CEO and the chairman, and he would let go of chairman if he could find somebody who was better than him. And it was a really interesting statement, because better than him was somebody who is like me. Somebody who is better than me on like my standard of what good is, rather than actually thinking maybe it doesn't need another me in this organization. Maybe it needs something different. So when it comes to leaders and looking at them, because I'm so interested in mindset, I'm pulling those different aspects out about the excitement that this guy creates in the vision, but yet he crushes his people. Steve Jobs had a very closely tight-knit group around him, but there's a bit too much of a God complex that happens sometimes. I think Elon Musk has got a little bit of that as well, because the people around are going, you're so great, you're so great. It's the compositions of the teams that do amazing things. Who am I to sit and criticize Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, right? But it's when I look at leaders, it's these different little snippets that you take from people, and then with my entrepreneurial leaders to go, well, who are you trying to become? Who do you want to be?
Yeah. And fundamentally, we can only become the person that we are. So, and taking those snippets out of great leadership, I believe we learn from great people everywhere, but we also learn from dumb people everywhere or bad leaders, because we're learning what not to do. So, along the journey. So I guess the COVID crisis has brought leadership out around the world to a fore. So it's more visible than ever. And, so many people say it's exposed in a crisis. So I prefer to say it's revealed in a crisis. So what are some of the traits that you see in the great leaders? And are they the same traits that you need to see in the leaders of today on the entrepreneurial journey that you support?
So again, this depends what you're trying to create and where you are on that journey. See, if you look at, Jacinda Ardern,
Yep.
Prime Minister of New Zealand. So there's a lot of talk about her, and I do think she's cool. The one thing that I would say is she's been praised a lot for looking after the people in this crisis. And there's a 3-minute clip of her and the things that they have achieved in her time as Prime Minister. And she's great, and she's really approachable. I have a huge amount of respect for her. She is one type of leader, though, because if you look at that 3-minute clip, it's about, what they did to help disadvantaged children or drug addicts or housing or maybe something on the environment, but there was nothing in there about science or progress or entrepreneurship, or like making a difference in that type of world. It was very much, let's take care of the people. Now, I'd be willing to bet anything that she's an F on that perspective that I was talking about before. I would bet anything on that. So that's the type of leader she becomes. So she becomes that leader, which is all about, I will take care of you. Whereas somebody like Steve Jobs' leader is going to be, we're going to do this thing. Do you want to get on board to do this thing and be on this journey? So it just depends on what leader, like what is it that is innate within you that you are going to bring into that style, and being very explicit about, this is what we are here to do, and this is what my approach is going to be, and do you want to be part of that? That's why there isn't a template cookie cutter thing for what is great leadership. Like, here are things to consider, but ultimately in the entrepreneurial world, it's probably less so in corporate, where you'll just have to fit whatever, to some
whatever
extent.
the mold is,
Exactly. Like, there's going to be much more constraints in there. But if you're an entrepreneurial leader, you can say, this is, my leadership style. This is what to expect. If you look at the guy, Ray Dalio from Bridgewater. Do you know Ray Dalio?
No, I don't.
He's like an investment fund manager. Bridgewater's like one of the most successful funds. So in his meetings, they give live feedback. So they sit with their iPads, and when somebody's talking, they're going like, well, that wasn't clear, or that was good, or he left that person out, or he didn't, he brought that person in at that point, and the meetings are filmed and scrutinized as a way to help people to perform better. Yeah. But Ray's not doing that as a witch hunt to say, he's not, he's doing it. He's saying, if you want to be in an environment where you are pushed to improve, like at every moment, then this is where you should come and work. And the people who thrive in that environment thrive there. And the people that don't. Yeah. So it's about understanding, what actually is that leadership style, and being explicit about it as an entrepreneur. Come here and I'm going to push you to your limits. Is that what you actually want? Come here and I'm going to take care of you. Yeah. What is it that you're actually, what's the leadership environment that you're actually going to create?
Yeah, I find leadership such a fascinating topic, and I guess that example that you've just provided really takes that concept of leaders always being on show to the next level, doesn't it? Because you are always on show in a meeting like that. And one of the interesting scenarios that I find is that when I share with people, or when I interact or facilitate leadership workshops, and I'm trying to get into that grassroots of what is great leadership in their eyes. Mm. Often they'll talk about people like, the Jobs and the Gates and the Zuckerbergs of the world, or the Nelson Mandelas, or this Mother Teresa. There's usually a general sense that that's great leadership. But then when I get them to ask a simple question about, share some great leadership that you've had in your career, very rarely do we get anything. But then when I ask them about when were they most successful, and they'll often be able to recite whether the team won or they're involved in a sporting team that won the premiership, or they work together as a team. And then I'll get them to describe your leader when you're most successful. So up until now, we've been working in this theoretical world of the Gandhis and the Mother Teresas, and all of a sudden they say, well, actually, that guy was really quite challenging, or that person really pushed me, or that person, I didn't like them all the time because they were pushing me out of my comfort zone. So all of a sudden we get this much clearer image of when they've had success in their lives and the style of leader that created or they responded to get that success. And sometimes it's at total odds of the light and fluffy picture that they were looking at initially, potentially. So I find the whole concept of leadership fascinating, and I could talk about it forever, but I won't. So leaders are...
See, a really quick one on that, Tony, is that when I went to Entrepreneurial Spark, there was the CEO there, Jim Duffy.
Yeah.
He'd grown it from nothing. The environment that he was very high performance. Do you know, you would get a text that said, "How's it going?" And you would think, like, why? What have you heard? What have you heard? It's not going well, do you know? And he'd always be like, "So what are you learning?" He'd always put you on the spot. And some people just couldn't cope with that. And there were times where I was a bit shredded by it. But, you know, what an upgrade that was in, like, performance level. And as an environment to thrive in where that level of challenge was there. Because my life has always been about this. You know, I don't have a family. I'm not married. I've no kids. I've no intention of doing either of those things. Like, I've always been about purpose. And he just set the bar so high. And it was, when it just resonated a lot when you were talking there about that sort of challenge. But at the same time, if you had a genuine problem, he would always be there. You know, you could, if you had a real problem, if you weren't just like dithering about, if you had a real problem, he would be there 100% in your corner. But his expectations were so high. And that's, you know, come to that environment if that's what you want. And if it isn't, don't come here because it will shred you, you know? So I just wanted to add that.
And often we need those people to really set the bar for us, because unfortunately the bar that a lot of people set for themselves is much lower than what they potentially can achieve. So what books had the biggest impact on you?
Do you know what do I like? Do you know, I always remember The Second Curve by Charles Handy, which is about, you know, innovation before you reach your peak. And it relates a lot to the inflection point as well, that prepare for this before you hit it. So it's just basically talking about, if you look at companies and anything, even societies, like they'll reach a zenith. Everything's great. You reach a zenith and then there's a decline. In the entrepreneurial world, at the inflection point, they reach that zenith and it doesn't necessarily decline, but it definitely plateaus. And what he was talking about was, like, always be asking that question. Like, when is this next curve going to kick in for us? And don't wait for it to peak. Like, always be looking around at, you know, what's almost like, what's the 10x? You know, what's the fundamental change that will take us up to the next level? I like that. I like this book about uncommon offering. Now I've forgotten the author. He was talking about, you know, USPs and the fact that unique selling point is a tricky term, right? Because what actually is truly unique, and to frame it as an uncommon offer, to say that we are not the only ones that do this, but it is about where do we add the most value in the marketplace? You know, what is our uncommon offer? It doesn't have to be unique, because there's such an important mindset shift around that to really double down on where your client base is going to get the most value. And Playing to Win, which is a strategy book by A.G. Lafley, there's some really good stuff in that. he was the CEO of Procter and Gamble, and some of the writing can feel a little bit dated at times, but yeah, just going back to these core fundamental principles. Always find that focus is the key.
Yeah.
If you're not focused on the right things, it doesn't matter what you're doing, and that's a really good book for focus.
So I think, is that Uncommon Offer? I was just doing some research while you were talking there. Was that from Robert Bloom's book, The Inside Advantage?
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. The Inside Advantage. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm certainly going to look that up myself now, because so many people struggle with that USP model and trying to really differentiate what is absolutely unique about their offer, because quite often there isn't much uniqueness around the offer. It's a generic market, and they're playing in that. So maybe that Uncommon Offering is going to offer some. Thanks for sharing that. It's given me something to look up. So what's the vision for you, Joe, moving forward?
So I want to solve this problem at the inflection point, because this is what I care about, Tony, is a meritocracy of ideas.
Yeah.
I want the best ideas to win, because when they do, everybody wins, and we move forward as a species level. If the best ideas are winning, it encourages other people to come up with better things so they can compete. It pushes everybody has to raise their game. So this problem that's happening at the inflection point is that you have these people who can create something from nothing, get to a stage where it just doesn't have the impact it could have. And it's not about the money necessarily, it's about the impact, and about that if you can encourage people to become better leaders at that point, then the cultures they create are more powerful, which empowers their people, which changes their home life. Like the ripple effect from cracking this problem is potentially massive, because this first stumbling block is such a step change. And the key thing is that if you recognize that you're going to go through these various inflection points, if I can take you through that first one, and you're thinking about, right, I understand, these things had to change, and there's another one coming, then they're better prepared for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So it's all about the meritocracy of ideas, and it's cracking it for this particular client group at this particular point on the journey. That's the only problem I'm interested in solving, not, the entrepreneurship challenge or whatever, not something massive and broad. This specific problem, because if we crack that, I think that we can have huge impact.
Excellent. So out of everything that you've accomplished, what are you most proud of?
Sometimes it's just those, the little wins, it's the difference that it can make, where you've highlighted to a leader some of those things about like the delegation and the empowerment, or even, do you know what? Go and not talk first in the meetings, because when you do, you pull it in a particular direction. Like talk last, and just seeing those little things happen. It's those. Like I could, there are people that I've helped to, get investment, and we're going up to the next level, and there's a national rollout, and great. Like those are the great things. But it's those ripples out. Yeah, I really like that, where you've said something, and not because I've told them to do it, but because I've helped them to see something that's preventing them from being the person they want to be. Yeah. They do want to empower their people. They just can't help it because they want to jump in and fill the space, or they feel it's my job as the leader to speak first, or to control this thing, or to always offer an opinion. But who are you actually trying to become? What is the leader you want to be? And just those little tweaks are the things that, they're really cool.
Yeah, and I can sense it just in the in your voice, and the energy and the enthusiasm around that behavioural change, and doing it for the reasons and seeing the benefits from that behavioural change. You can certainly see that's part of your psyche. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have, or jump on the soapbox if that's what you so desire? Is there anything else that I should have jumped in and got you talking about?
Soapbox, you say, right? Well, look, it's hard, right? It's hard not to sort of tear down what somebody else is doing. And I don't really want to do that. I'd much rather go, here is a different way. If that's interesting, rather than like your way is wrong, like here is a different way. Let's look at it this way. And if this is interesting to you, then, come over here and let's talk about it. But we need to move away from I believe we need to move away from the myth of what entrepreneurship is. And that there are so many people that I've met on that journey that it's like, you should join a startup. You shouldn't try and run a startup because you're not set up to do it. But if you like that type of environment where things are happening and it's exciting, and like, go and join somebody's startup. I mean, how many people are actually doing that have got player experience? Very few. It tends to be like these junior teams, which again slows the journey down. There's a horrible obsession with the wrong metrics at the stage before and around the inflection point. Like, somebody somewhere is just desperate to add another 5-bar gate to the amount of scale-up companies there are out there, because it helps them in their report to say blah blah. Like, let's just be honest about this. Like, in Scotland, for me, there's not 50,000 of these entrepreneurs that could potentially scale. There's not 5,000. There's probably 50. So let's try and find the right 50, because if we crack the system for that, if we get the support right there, then the ones that come after will go through it faster. This mass market sort of whitewashing of entrepreneurial information, it's not the way to do it, man. So let's focus on the right metrics, and it's not number of businesses started. It's just not as important as who's got 20 employees and how are they getting up to their next level.
Yep. And I guess that metric, when the metric's only only interested in how many businesses are starting, sooner or later there's going to be another metric that says how many businesses are folding or failing or closing down. So,
and why, and who could have become more? Like, it's the qual questions. It's not the number. It's not just like how many get started and how many were on a program. And it's like, what's really going on? And I think a lot of that is inside, people's minds. If people understood more about how they think, we would solve half that problem. And then the strategy piece would solve the other bit.
Been a fascinating conversation, Joseph. How can people connect with you?
So they can find me josephtrodden.com, and I'm on LinkedIn as well, Joe Trodden. That's my primary channels. I don't do any other. I don't do any Facebook, or I'm not pretty enough for Instagram. So they can find me through the website and look at the programs. Like, there's free programs on there. Go and take a Myers-Briggs test at 16personalities.com. And like I say, it's a specific subset. If you're at that point where you've come through that stage of growth, 10 employees, your plates are spinning, you don't have a written strategy, you've probably got something. But you need the right people around you if you want to go up to the next level. Absolutely.
I took that 16 personalities test probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I've been trying to rack my brain as to how the letters fell for me, and I have got absolutely no idea. But Joseph, thank you very much for your time today. It's been much appreciated.
Thank you, Tony. Great speaking to you.
Join the group of people impacted by seriously simple stuff to get you unstuck. The first book by Tony Coach Curl. Available at Amazon, Tony's Simple Stuff provides the tool for people to master your life and aspirations. 20% of every book sold supports Carter's cause.
Now, I usually say this, but what a fantastic conversation. And it was an amazing conversation. Now, Joseph has access to a number of free resources, which the link we will put in the show notes. And one of them is a growth checklist, and I would encourage and recommend any business owner out there to download that particular resource. It really is insightful for you in your business endeavors. One of the things that I really liked about Joseph was how clear and specific he was on his target market, the people that Joseph works with. He knows exactly the offer that he creates for these entrepreneurs at that particular stage in their journey, and he's very clear and doesn't get distracted from that. So I think when you're thinking about your particular business and your particular target market, there's a real lesson, there's a real message there from Joseph on being really clear and specific about the people that you work with. The growth period after startup is pivotal for business, Joseph says, and I help you get it. So it's very, very clear. It's a very specific point in the journey. One of the other things that I picked up on Joseph's website is that I'm on this planet to create massive impact. Are you? And once again, he's open. He's really clear around what it is that he wants to do, and that's why, in many ways, that he's got those free resources that are available to the entrepreneurial set who may not necessarily fit that exact specific that Joseph works with. So what we know from businesses is that energy, enthusiasm, passion, and purpose helps build the base, and the entrepreneurs and founders that generate that energy, they commence the build, but they attract people and they attract investors into that business. And what we see from investors is that they're investing in a business for potential and, the potential of the market, the idea, the energy. So investors invest in the person and the idea, but then where sometimes it goes haywire is that they don't invest in the person ongoing. So because the development of that particular leader is often seen as a less tangible outcome. Now, this seriously has to change because founders need leadership. They need to become conscious leaders. The development of a leader is imperative for the increased growth of the business. The development of the leader is imperative for the business. So Joseph helps with the structural processes that are needed when entrepreneurs hit that inflection point that Joseph talks about. But developing the emotional intelligence aspects of leaders will help you lead your team consciously and not from that emotion-charged environment that we often see with entrepreneurs and startups. So check out the links in the show notes to Joseph and how he can help you develop the structure and the processes that you need. But I'll also include a link to the emotional intelligence stuff that we do here at Think and Grow Business, because both are imperative when you're looking at growing your business and wanting to leverage up from that initial startup stage. In today's disruptive world, good leadership skills will always stand you in great stead. Now, if you're looking to build your better leadership skills, consider Think and Grow Business and the Coach Girl Academy. Think and Grow Business is my business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book in your free discovery call at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. The Coach Girl Academy is my online academy. We've got 78 programs in there to help build a better you. The first month is just $1. Just $1 jolly dollar. The academy that equips you and enhances mindset, leadership, and business. Check it out at thecoachgirlacademy.com. Once again, remember, you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. You know what that is. Just don't be an arsehole. I'll see you next week.